Okay, number 2. So we're going to talk, first video, we're looking at this idea of imitating Jesus. And in Mark's gospel, he's pretty clear on 3 different elements. There are other elements, like he touches on authority, he touches on Jesus around finance. There's different things that we could touch on, but it seems like the 3 main pieces that he goes after is around suffering, service, and sacrifice. And so we want to have a chat around suffering in the nicest way possible. When you hear the words of Jesus that he said to his disciples in Mark's gospel, deny yourself, how do you guys understand that in a modern world as parents, working, whatever that is? What does deny yourself mean?
Yeah, I guess it
just looks, I love you just look straight to Carl.
I get it. It really means like not choosing what you would choose yourself a lot of the time. So like it's choosing what the Lord is asking you to do. And like a lot of the times me and my kind of humanness, the choices that I would make would be quite different to the ones that I think Jesus is asking me to make. Right. So yeah, I'm not totally sure.
Yeah. Well, no, I get what you're saying, and you have to do that. Like we were talking a little bit before around this. Like you both do public things, some speaking, even that in a sense is denying yourself. Like, can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I think like just most of the time, whatever God calls you to do, for most of us, like it's going to be like, it's going to have to do a bit with like our giftings, but a lot of the time it's things that maybe we've never done before. It's like, it's just, well, for me personally, it's brand new. So I wouldn't always have been involved in ministry or public, like preaching or any of that sort of thing. Like I prefer the quiet space. I prefer one-to-one conversations. I prefer being in the back or upstairs with kids. But then in the last 10 years, like the Lord has called me up to, to preach or to stand in front of people and talk, and that's so uncomfortable for me. And there's an element of like when I'm asked to do those things, I just cringe instantly. I'm just like, no, how can I get out of this? But there's
this right
even
here.
This right now. I'm denying myself, Lord, I can reward. But no, he gives you the grace to do it, and there's a part of you that like when my heart is tethered with His, I have to follow where he's leading me. Like I want to find out like what happens if I do step out in obedience. Like what's my reward? Like a bit of that kind of relationship with the Lord, where like yes, I have free will and I can easily say no, sorry, I have to take a nap at 2:00, so actually I can't make it to this what we're doing right now. So, but in my heart of hearts, I know like no, God has asked me to do this. So, and I wanna live my life in obedience to Him. I want to say yes. So to me, denying myself looks like not doing what I want to do during this time of my day and doing what God has asked me to do. And now I get to spend the afternoon with you guys. It's great.
Well, thank you for that.
Such a burden to you.
But so Jesus, we're free in Him, right? But he invites us to deny ourselves, and you have to be free in order to deny yourself. Like we talked the last time about the role of the Holy Spirit. You really need the power of the Spirit to be able to deny yourself, to be able to stop and say, my ego or my flesh, whatever language you want to use, is telling me to move in this direction. My reputation, is moving me in this direction. And yet, Jesus, when I sit with you, my sense is you're asking me to go here. Whether that is, for anybody listening, that could be in the workplace, that could be at home, that could be with family or friends, or, who knows. Yeah. But it's such a counterintuitive, countercultural way to live, is to say, I'm not going to build my own kingdom, empire. Right. I'm looking to do it with somebody else. Like that's unbelievable. You need the Spirit to do that. Yeah. And it's a credit to you guys. And I know you're not perfect, but I've seen it. I've seen you both choose to deny yourselves and step into that, which is great. Would you add anything else?
I was just going to say, I don't know if we've covered this already, but it reminds me of Jesus in the garden.
Yeah.
In Gethsemane, whenever he obviously didn't want to go to the cross, and he was asking the Father, is there any way that you can take this cup from me, to the point where like he was sweating blood, like the anxiety that he was feeling in that moment. He would have given anything to not, but he surrendered and said, but not my will, but yours.
Yeah.
And the love that he must have had for the Father, and the trust that he had in the Father's heart to do what he was asked to do for the joy that was set before him. Like, what incredible faith that Jesus had in his Father, to know, like, this isn't the end. There's a joy that's set before me.
Yeah.
There's a reward waiting for me. And so when it comes to denying myself, I'm very much like a reward-based type person. And that's biblical, based on what Jesus demonstrated for us. And it didn't make the cross easy. It was hard and it was gruesome. But what joy on Resurrection Sunday, whenever he got to see his friends again and go and see his Father. Was it 40, 50 days after that? Don't remember. But like the joy that he must have experienced.
Yeah. You're so right. I love when you talk about that, like the joy set before him. Because yes, we're denying ourselves, but we're actually getting something so much more in return, right? Like it's that receiving of. Jesus also says something else. He says, deny yourself and take up your cross and follow me. Like we live in a Western sort of modern culture. You're free to be a Christian. This association of what Jesus is saying, he's clearly talking about his own death, what that will look like. There's an emphasis on martyrdom. You know, the chances of us being martyred for our faith are very slim, although we live in a world today that if you go to certain parts of the world, there are people that are being martyred for their faith. But how do you understand that? What does it look like for you, you know, as a pastor, as a parent, as a male, female, whatever that is? What does it look like for you to carry your cross in this day and age? How do you understand that?
I think it's there's a part of me that feels like I have it easier than other people do, because I'm a pastor. And you know, I come into my workplace and I'm surrounded by other people who are followers of Jesus.
Right.
You know, we think similarly, our attitudes are similar, our values are similar. Like it feels easy. And then I chat to other people who are just in their workplace and they feel like so isolated, so alone, nearly like ostracized because of the faith that they have. Some of them even feel, you know, pressured to behave in ways contrary to what Jesus asked them to do because of kind of the environment that they find themselves in their work. So I feel like I've got it like easier than most. It feels like at the minute, you know, we're not in a place where martyrdom is a thing here, thankfully. But I think it's tougher now for people to follow Jesus in our society than it, you know, than it has been in my lifetime, you know.
Right.
And for me, I think there's been there are still moments whenever you're faced with the, you know, difficult decisions or difficult challenges. I guess one for me was when I just a couple of years after I became a Christian, you know, I felt God very clearly asked me to take a gap year, not go to uni yet, and to take a gap year. And it was kind of the clearest I'd ever heard God speak to me before. And I grew up in a home where like Jesus wasn't the center of our house. So like my mum and dad don't follow Jesus. So to try to explain to my mum and dad that God's asking me to take a gap year was an interesting conversation, I'll put it that way. And it was difficult because I like really love my parents and I don't want to let them down. And I also like, I just have this like people pleasing thing that I just wrestle with a lot. And for two of the people in the world who you love the most, to feel like you're letting them down because you're not doing what they kind of had in mind wasn't easy. But I knew what obedience needed to look like in that moment. And the cool thing was like, even within that, there were difficult conversations that needed to be had. but actually, like by the end of the year, I remember like at the very end of the year, I went to Romania for a while, and my mum had slipped like a note into my suitcase, and she just wrote in this note like, I know that we kind of disagreed about what this year was going to look like, but your dad and I just want you to know that you made the right decision. We can see the difference in your life kind of because of what you've been doing this year. And, you know, in that moment, it was worth it. And you just hope that, you know, in those moments that the Lord's just showing more of himself to them, and, you know, that one day that they'll love him, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that is beautiful. I love that. I love that story. I love your heart for your parents, but also your love for Jesus in the midst of it. It actually makes me think of John the Baptist when he says, I must decrease, he must increase. It's like when we're denying ourselves, when we're taking up our cross, we're actually imitating his life. So the power of our lives becomes so much more, right? Like what we have to offer people, what you have to offer your parents becomes so much greater, because you're making room for Jesus, that they get to catch him in the midst of your life, which is so good. Heather, I like it. I want to sort of end on this, because I think you talk about this well, about Jesus in the garden and about marrying the two together. So in a different gospel, John's gospel, Jesus says in John 10:10 that I've come so that you may have life and life in abundance. So everyone's like, yes, that's unbelievable. But then Jesus in Mark's gospel talks about taking up your cross and denying yourself. How do you marry the two? You know, you give us the example of the Garden of Gethsemane.
Yeah.
I think that's an amazing example, right? Like, can you try and articulate that, how the two combine, about a burning heart and different elements like that?
Yeah. Well, I think like in a very like small example of doing something for the joy that is set before you. Like I ran a marathon in 2016, and honestly, when it got really hard, I ran it with my friends, so that was helpful. But when it got really hard, I was just like, we want the free t-shirt, we want the medal, I want to eat pizza. And it doesn't make what you're going through any easier, but it gives you momentum to keep going, to get that foot in front of the other, to keep going. And I think the Lord is inviting us to have our eyes on the prize, like have your eyes on the prize that is set before you to run your race. And I think like Jesus modeled that so beautifully in the garden. Like who in their right mind actually wants to run a marathon? Like I'm not doing it to, I don't know, I just want to eat pizza. I want a prize, you know, like, and Jesus had not that mentality. I don't want to be disrespectful, but like in the garden, he didn't want to do something, and it was going to be the hardest thing he's ever had to do. But he knew there was something bigger, and he trusted the Father enough to see him through that, not just to see him through it for the sake of seeing it through, but for what was to come afterwards.
Yeah.
And I think as Christians, we can get so caught up in the suffering for the sake of suffering. But you know what I love, and you kind of touched on this as well, like seeing someone who is in the middle of suffering and they're still able to maintain hope. And you're just like, how? But that's the gift of being in a relationship with Jesus. Everyone is going to suffer at some point in your life. But we have this hope that, you know what? When you're with an unbeliever and they're in the middle of their suffering, they're going to want that same hope. And that's what we have to share with others, which isn't a tangent. But I just feel like there's something bigger. There's something greater. There is something that the Lord is calling us into. It's going to require suffering, but it'll be worth it.
Yeah. I think you are right, though. In our darkest moments, they can become the most evidence for the power of the work of God in our lives. I'll never forget chatting to a guy whose son was very unwell, and his son actually made an amazing sort of miraculous recovery. But he says he misses the intimacy that he felt with God in the hospital, in the ICU, because of how he just was like, I'm surrounded here by God. And in those moments, so many other people, like there was another family with their son, and they were like, they just started sharing about Jesus with them, because they were like, wow, we could not do this without him. Like there's something so much bigger going on, which I know you said tangent, but I think that's a really important tangent for us. Because I just think of the people who'll be listening to this is like, we want to be people that follow Jesus, that deny ourselves as we go into work, as we go into our marriages, into our singleness, into our grief, into whatever that looks like for us. We're denying ourselves so that we can take on him, so that we can take on more of him, which is where we all want to be, isn't it? Thank you, guys. That's good. Our next conversations are going to look at service and sacrifice. So thanks for talking about suffering.